KLIF News Time 8:20. Good morning. I'm Dave Williams with Amy Shadroff. The nurse in Dallas who contracted Ebola while working on the first U.S. case of the deadly disease said that her employer failed her during the medical crisis. She is suing for negligence and an invasion of privacy.
Attorney Tim Hoch is a legal strategist and head of the Hoch Law Firm with offices in Dallas and Fort Worth. He joins us now live to weigh in on Nina Pham's case. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first of all, the hospital has already settled with Thomas Duncan, who was patient, I guess, ground zero, the first person to come down with Ebola. How likely is it that the hospital will settle with Nina Pham, or do you think this lawsuit will end up in court?
Oh, I think they'll definitely reach an out-of-court settlement with this case. This is a public relations nightmare for the hospital. Here's a frontline worker who was doing her job and doing it valiantly. As a matter of fact, she was named one of Time Magazine's People of the Year as a frontline healthcare provider, and this is just an awful turn of events for the hospital.
What can you tell us about the specifics here that would lead the hospital to just be done, rather prefer to be done with this than to have it all dragged out in court?
Well, there are a couple of things that form the basis of the lawsuit. The first one is the allegation that the hospital failed to train her properly, right? And if you look at the allegations, if they're even halfway true, you will see an appalling sense of misdirection on behalf of the hospital. They didn't really know where they were going. They didn't know what they were dealing with. Certain hospital administrators would use Google to try to determine how to deal with this particular crisis. So that's number one, the failure to train. And then the other one is this invasion of privacy allegation. I don't know if you've read any of those allegations, but those are just stunning. She was very specific in stating that she didn't want certain things about her treatment disclosed, and they used her as a PR pawn, according to the lawsuit.
Yeah, and that was kind of disturbing to me because I know there was that video that was released about her, and I know everyone in the media used it thinking that it was something that she wanted out there, and we're learning now through this interview with the Dallas Morning News that it's something she didn't want to be released.
And I think she was very specific. And then I think the other issue with respect to the invasion of privacy is even if she had signed some consent that allowed her, right, or allowed them to use the video or to use anything using her name on it, you got to understand whether she had the capacity to give that consent, right? Because towards the end of her treatment there, they were asking her to make end-of-life decisions. So it's just an awful, awful PR mess for these folks.
Also, when Mr. Duncan first showed up at the emergency room there at Dallas Presby, she was the nurse in charge, and she and another nurse went in with double gloves taped to double gowns, and they wore double booties and a face shield, understanding that they might be involved in some terribly contagious disease, but that the hospital did not have hazmat-type suits. And she said that other hospitals always have that kind of equipment available for the health workers for such things as the flu and even H1N1.
Yes, I saw that. And, it's interesting to note that because these folks, if you read the petition or you read the allegations at least that were made, these frontline workers were really improvising, right? I mean, it sounds like they were sort of cannibalizing certain different uniforms and whatnot and double gloving and doing what they could without any direction at all from the higher ups. So that's really an appalling lack of any direction on behalf of the management of the hospital.
You expect if Nina Pham is successful here that Amber Vincent will also file a lawsuit?
I would suspect so. I think that the biggest consideration now is the future for these folks, right? If you look at the allegations that Nina Pham is making, and perhaps this would be the same for Ms. Vincent, that is, what does the future hold? No one really knows, and it's really frightening. She's got some hair loss that people some of the doctors attribute to Ebola. She's got the threat of perhaps some organ failure in the future. She's really got to look after what does she have in the future.
Do you have any idea how large the case may go in terms of dollars?
It would be impossible to tell. The hospital settled with Thomas Duncan, and in terms of just pure legal grounds, the hospital probably had a fairly good defense with respect to Mr. Duncan, but it's difficult for them to, in this case, to defend this one, especially invasion of privacy allegations. So in terms of dollar amounts, I just don't know.
Well, Tim, thanks so much for your expertise this morning. We really appreciate it. Attorney Tim Hoch, legal strategist and head of the Hoch Law Firm with offices in both Dallas and Fort Worth.
KLIF News Time 8:25. Another look at that Monday morning traffic. Here's Bill Jackson.
In Dallas downtown, I-30 westbound at I-30, stalled tractor trailer finally moved.